It started with a sound so faint most people would have missed it. A single word barely carried on breath. But for the man who heard it, that whisper was louder than any scream. Please. 2 decades of experience had taught Dr. Adrian Cole to trust his instincts. He had seen fear before. Victims of accidents, patients hiding illnesses, teenagers nervous about medical exams. But never had he seen fear like this. Fear that seemed to fill the air around his patient, choking her voice before it could even form. Her name was Elena Marquez, 16 years old. Thin, pale, with dark hair she kept pulling across her face as though it could shield her from the world. She walked into Riverside Community Clinic with her father, and from the moment they entered, something felt wrong. The waiting room was ordinary that day. A mother rocked a fussy toddler. An elderly couple sat quietly, holding hands. The receptionist typed steadily at her computer, occasionally glancing up with a polite smile. Nothing seemed unusual, until Elena and her father stepped inside. Darius Kane carried himself with quiet authority. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a posture that demanded space without asking for it. He placed a hand on Elena's shoulder as he spoke to the receptionist, his smile polite but thin, his voice steady. He explained she hadn't been feeling well, that she'd had stomach pains, some fatigue. He signed her in, thanked the staff, and guided her to a seat. From the outside he looked like a concerned, attentive father. But Elena's body told another story. She sat hunched, small in her chair, her gaze fixed on the floor tiles. When her father shifted his hand on her shoulder, her muscles stiffened. When he leaned close to speak to her, she pulled away almost imperceptibly, like a plant shrinking from shadow. Dr. Cole didn't see this immediately. But when the nurse called them back and he entered the exam room, the pieces began to fit. "Good afternoon," he greeted warmly. "I'm Dr. Cole. Elena, right?" She nodded faintly. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Yes." Before he could ask more, Darius jumped in. "She's been having stomach pains, a little nausea, fatigue. Probably nothing serious, but I thought we should be cautious." His tone was smooth, confident, practiced. Dr. Cole offered a reassuring smile and directed his next question to Elena. "How long have you been feeling unwell?" She hesitated. Her lips parted. Her eyes flicked toward her father. Before she could answer, Darius spoke. "A few weeks." He squeezed her shoulder lightly. "Right, Elena?" She nodded quickly, her lips pressed tight. Dr. Cole noted the dynamic immediately. He tried again. "Can you describe the pain for me, Elena?" Again her hesitation. Again her glance toward Darius. And again he stepped in. "It's not constant, just off and on. Probably stress from school." He chuckled softly, the sound rehearsed. "You know how teenagers are." Elena's eyes dropped back to the floor. The pattern repeated. Every question directed to her was intercepted by him. Every time she tried to speak, he silenced her with presence alone. To a stranger it might have looked like overprotective parenting. To Dr. Cole it looked like something else entirely. "Perhaps Elena might feel more comfortable if you waited outside," he suggested carefully. For the first time Darius's smile faltered. His jaw tightened just slightly. "No," he said firmly. "She's fine with me here." But she wasn't fine. When Dr. Cole began the physical exam, Elena's body trembled under his touch. Her pulse raced. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. He reassured her gently, but her eyes kept darting toward her father, who sat watching closely, his expression unreadable. The uneasy nod at Dr. Cole. He recommended an ultrasound, explaining it was routine just to rule out anything serious. Darius agreed instantly. Too instantly, as if eager to maintain control. The room grew heavier as the machine powered on. Elena lay on the exam table, her small frame rigid. Darius sat in the chair beside her, his eyes locked not on the monitor but on her face. And then, in black and white, the truth appeared. A flicker. A rhythm. A tiny heartbeat pulsing steadily. Dr. Cole's stomach dropped. He had seen it countless times before. But this time was different. Elena was pregnant. He kept his expression neutral, masking the shock that surged through him. He turned to her gently. "Elena, you're pregnant." Her reaction wasn't surprise. It wasn't even confusion. It was despair. Tears welled instantly, spilling down her cheeks as she turned her face away. Her hands tightened into fists. Darius didn't move. He didn't gasp, didn't shout. He simply sat still, his expression calm, controlled, his jaw set. "How far along?" he asked, his voice steady. Dr. Cole explained briefly, then glanced at Elena. Her lips trembled, but no words came. She stared at the ceiling as if wishing it would swallow her whole. I'd like to arrange counseling, Dr. Cole suggested carefully, and perhaps a private conversation if that would help. Darius cut him off, his tone sharp. That won't be necessary. We'll handle this as a family. And then it happened. So faint it was almost lost under the hum of the machine, Elena whispered a single word. Please. Dr. Cole froze. He had heard it. He knew he had. But Darius shifted in his chair, and Elena's lips pressed shut once more. The moment was gone. The appointment ended with polite words. Darius thanked the doctor, his hand firm on Elena's shoulder as he guided her toward the door. But as she stepped out, she turned her head. Just for a second. Her eyes met Dr. Cole's. What? Terrified. Begging. That look would follow him long after the door closed. That night, Dr. Adrian Cole couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying every detail of the visit. Elena's trembling hands. The way she flinched when her father touched her. The ultrasound screen flashing with a heartbeat that should have been a moment of joy but instead brought only tears. And then that word, so soft, so desperate. Please. He tried to convince himself he was overthinking it. Teenagers sometimes feared their parents. Families had complicated dynamics. But deep down he knew better. He had practiced medicine too long to mistake shyness for terror. Elena wasn't just uncomfortable. She was trapped. Over the next days, he reviewed his notes again and again, as though answers might emerge from the ink on the page. He replayed the father's calmness, the control in his voice, the way he intercepted every question. Darius Kane carried himself not like a parent seeking help for his child, but like a man guarding a secret. Still, Dr. Cole had no evidence. Nothing solid. Suspicion wasn't proof. Reporting without grounds could backfire. But doing nothing, how could he live with himself if he turned a blind eye? The memory gnawed at him until it seeped into his dreams. In one, Elena stood at the end of a long hallway reaching for him, whispering the same word again and again. Please. He would run toward her, but every step made the hallway stretch longer, pulling her further away. He would wake drenched in sweat, his chest heavy with dread. And then just a week later she returned. The moment he saw her in the waiting room, his stomach twisted. She looked worse. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes ringed with shadows, her movements slow as though every step cost her. Darius hovered over her more closely than before. His hand never far from her shoulder, his eyes scanning the room like a hawk guarding prey. Dr. Cole greeted them, forcing his voice steady. Good afternoon, Elena. She managed a faint nod, her lips pressed into the same thin line. Darius answered before she could. She's still not feeling great. Thought we should follow up, make sure everything's all right. They entered the exam room. Darius sat even closer this time, his chair pulled almost beside the table where Elena perched. Dr. Cole's unease deepened. The man's presence was suffocating. He began the exam, his hands steady though his mind churned. Elena's body was thinner than before, her frame fragile, her hands shaking so much she could barely hold still. Her eyes flicked toward her father with every movement, like a prisoner checking the guard. Dr. Cole leaned down, speaking softly so only she could hear. Elena, how are you feeling? Really? Her lips trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth but nothing came out. Darius shifted in his seat, pulling his phone from his pocket. Elena's gaze snapped to him and she froze. For a moment, the room was silent except for the soft tapping of Darius's thumb on the screen. And then, in that sliver of opportunity, she whispered. 2 words this time. Help me. Dr. Cole's pulse surged. The words were faint, but they hit like a gunshot. He wanted to react, to reassure her, to promise that he would. But years of training kept his face calm, his tone even. If Darius suspected she had spoken, the consequences could be catastrophic. He nodded gently, pretending to adjust his instruments, and forced himself to continue the exam as though nothing had happened. Inside his thoughts roared. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. This wasn't a hunch. Elena had asked for help. When the exam ended, Darius rose quickly. Thank you, doctor, he said, his voice polite but final. He placed his hand firmly on Elena's shoulder, guiding her toward the door. She didn't look back this time. She walked out silently, her head bowed, her body rigid under his grip. The door closed. Dr. Cole sat frozen at his desk, his hands trembling. He stared at the empty room, at the faint imprint left on the exam table, at the notes on his chart. The silence was deafening. He took a deep breath, pulled a fresh sheet of paper, and began to write. Every detail. The trembling. The flinches. The intercepted answers. The whispered pleas. The pregnancy. the despair in her eyes. He wrote until his hand cramped, until the truth filled the page in black and white. And then he picked up the phone. His heart pounded as he dialed, each ring echoing louder than the last. When the line connected, his voice was steady but urgent. "This is Dr. Adrian Cole. I need to report a case. A patient. A 16-year-old girl. She's in danger. Please, you have to listen." In that moment he knew there was no turning back. Because this wasn't just a frightened teenager. This wasn't just a pregnancy. This was evidence of something horrific. Something that would soon shock an entire community. And the name at the center of it all was Darius Kane. The call from Dr. Adrian Cole reached the local authorities late that afternoon. At first it sounded like a routine welfare concern, one of many they received in a week. But something in his voice made the intake officer pause. Doctors didn't tremble. Doctors didn't beg. Yet his words carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. "She's 16, he said. Pregnant. Afraid of her father." She whispered for help. "Please, don't let this slip through the cracks." By protocol, a case file was opened. A child protection officer was dispatched to quietly begin inquiries. They started with Elena's school. Teachers confirmed she was enrolled but noted her recent absences, her withdrawn demeanor, her habit of sitting alone at lunch. Some had seen faint bruises, which Elena always dismissed as accidents. None had questioned too deeply. She was quiet, polite, invisible. Neighbors, however, told a different story. One, an elderly woman who lived across the street, described seeing Elena at her bedroom window late at night. She stood there just staring out. Once, I swear she mouthed something looked like help. Then the curtains shut. Another neighbor said they rarely saw her outside, except when her father was right beside her. It was like she wasn't allowed to walk 5 feet without him. Another recalled arguments. Yelling always late at night. Not just raised voices, screaming. But then silence. Like someone turned a switch. The picture forming was grim. Still, it wasn't enough. Suspicion wasn't proof. Child protection needed something concrete. That's when they turned back to Dr. Cole's medical report. His notes, written with precision, carried details impossible to dismiss. Trembling, flinching, intercepted answers, whispered pleas, evidence of pregnancy. Combined with the testimonies, it was enough for a judge to authorize deeper investigation. Detectives began surveillance on Darius Kane. They parked unmarked cars near his neighborhood, watching patterns. He rarely left Elena alone. She walked beside him with her head down, shoulders hunched. He did the shopping, drove her to appointments, controlled every interaction. Behind the scenes, investigators sought records. They pulled school reports, medical histories, custody documents. It was then they uncovered the past. Elena's mother, Elena Marquez. Years earlier, Lucia had fought for custody during a bitter divorce. But Darius had won, painting her as unstable, unfit, dangerous. Court transcripts revealed his strategy. He had produced evidence of a past mistake. In court, he destroyed her. He exposed her past struggle with depression, the moment years earlier when she had attempted to end her life. She had survived, recovered, built a stable life, but Darius twisted that pain into a weapon. What the transcripts didn't capture was the quiet destruction of a mother's bond with her daughter. 4 years, Lucia had been shut out, allowed only limited contact under Darius's watch. Every attempt to fight back was crushed by his legal maneuvers and his calm, unshakable demeanor. The investigators began to suspect that what Darius had hidden all along was far darker than the court ever imagined. The breakthrough came when a warrant was secured for a raid. On a cold Thursday evening, the quiet neighborhood was shattered by flashing red and blue. Police vans pulled up in front of the Kane residence. Officers in tactical gear fanned out, their boots pounding against pavement. Neighbors spilled from their homes, whispering, clutching coats tight against the night air. "Police, open the door." No answer. The battering ram struck once, twice, and the door burst inward. Officers stormed the house. Commands echoed through the walls. Clear. Upstairs secure. Basement locked. What they found inside would confirm the nightmare Dr. Cole had feared. Inside the Kane home, the air was heavy, stale, almost suffocating. Officers moved methodically from room to room, their flashlights cutting through dim light. On the surface, the house appeared ordinary: tidy living room, framed family photos on the walls, dishes stacked neatly in the kitchen sink. But the deeper they searched, the clearer it became that this was not the home of a loving father and daughter. It was a prison. In Elena's bedroom, officers found the first signs. The walls were bare, stripped of posters or personal touches. The closet contained only a few outfits, all modest, all carefully chosen. On the nightstand, a small stack of notebooks lay hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Inside were Elena's writings, pages of desperate words, some crossed out, some smudged by tears. Over and over she wrote the same things: "I'm scared. He won't let me go. Please, someone help me." One entry stopped the officers cold. In shaky handwriting, Elena had written, "I'm carrying his secret. I can't tell anyone. I don't want this baby." Downstairs, another team broke into the locked basement. The door was reinforced with multiple bolts, unusual for a family home. When the officers entered, they found a room that told its own story. The basement was dimly lit, with a single mattress pushed against the wall. Beside it sat a small table cluttered with empty water bottles and scraps of food wrappers. Shackles were bolted into the floor nearby, though rusted from disuse. The walls bore faint scratches, marks of someone trapped and trying desperately to escape. But it was the drawer in Darius's locked desk that revealed the most chilling evidence. Inside were neatly organized folders containing ultrasound images, each labeled with dates. Some went back months, carefully preserved, as though he was archiving the progression of Elena's pregnancy. Tucked alongside them were photographs of Elena, clearly taken without her consent. She appeared in pajamas in her room, even asleep. In a second folder were printed emails and court documents from years earlier, records of his custody battle with Elena Marquez. It became clear he had weaponized her past mistakes, collecting every shred of evidence against her to strip her of her daughter. He had planned meticulously, building a wall that kept Elena in his control. The most disturbing discovery was in a small locked box hidden beneath the desk. Inside were journals written in Darius's own hand. His words were chilling, twisted attempts to justify the unjustifiable. One passage read, "She belongs to me. No one else can understand her. No one else can protect her. She is mine, and this child proves it." Another, "Lucia was weak. She didn't deserve to raise Elena. I saved her from that life. She doesn't need anyone but me." The evidence was undeniable. This was not a case of teenage pregnancy. This was years of grooming, manipulation, and abuse. When Elena was found in her room during the raid, she was trembling, her face pale with terror. Officers spoke gently, reassuring her she was safe now. But she barely responded, her voice caught in her throat. She clutched her stomach protectively, tears streaming silently down her face. Darius was arrested on the spot. As officers led him in handcuffs down the front steps, neighbors gathered in stunned silence. Some gasped, others whispered. The man they thought was a devoted father was exposed as something monstrous. Darius's expression remained calm, even as flashbulbs from police cameras lit his face. He didn't struggle. He didn't deny. He simply stared ahead, his eyes cold and unblinking. The evidence collected filled box after box. Photographs, journals, ultrasound prints, Elena's hidden notebooks, medical confirmation from Dr. Cole's reports. Every piece fit together into a portrait of abuse so disturbing it left even seasoned detectives shaken. At the station, as the evidence was catalogued, one detective whispered to another, "This is the worst I've seen in 20 years. Meanwhile, word of the raid spread quickly. News vans crowded the quiet street. Reporters shouted questions. What happened inside that house? How long had this been going on? Who is Darius Kane really? For Elena, the nightmare wasn't over. She was taken to a safe facility, where doctors and counselors began the slow process of helping her recover. The physical evidence confirmed what the notebooks and journals already made clear. She had been molested, assaulted, controlled for years. The pregnancy was not an accident. It was the result of repeated abuse at the hands of the man who should have protected her most. Her mother, Lucia, was contacted immediately. When she arrived, her cries echoed through the halls. Years of separation, forced by Darius's manipulation, had kept her from protecting her daughter. Now she faced the unbearable truth. Her silence had allowed his control to flourish. She wept as she held Elena for the first time in years, whispering apologies over and over. Elena leaned into her, but her eyes remained distant, haunted. The community struggled to comprehend the truth. Neighbors replayed every interaction in their minds, searching for signs they had missed. Teachers wondered how they had overlooked the bruises, the silence. And Dr. Cole, the man who had first heard Elena's whispered plea, carried both relief and sorrow. Relief that she was finally safe, sorrow that he hadn't been able to stop it sooner. The raid had ripped the mask from Darius Kane. He was no longer the polite, calm father who waved at neighbors and attended school meetings. He was a predator, exposed by the evidence he could no longer hide. But this was only the beginning. Because once Darius was in custody, the question remained, would he confess? Or would he cling to the lies he had lived by for years? At the police station, Darius Kane sat in a gray interrogation room, his wrists cuffed to the table. The calm smile he wore as officers stormed his house had not left his face. He sat upright, composed as if he were the one in control. Detectives laid the evidence before him. The journals, the photographs, the ultrasound images, Elena's notebooks. They spoke plainly, reciting the charges: sexual assault, child abuse, unlawful imprisonment. Each word was heavy, undeniable. Still, Darius remained calm. "You're mistaken," he said softly. "You don't understand. I was protecting her." Detective Ramirez leaned forward. "Protecting her? We found journals in your handwriting. We found photos. We found her words, begging for help. What were you protecting her from?" Darius's eyes flickered, just for a moment before he composed himself again. "From her mother," he replied. "Lucia was weak. She drank. She was reckless. I saved Elena from that life. Everything I did was to keep her safe." His words were chilling, not because of their volume but because of their certainty. He believed them. Another detective placed one of the journals in front of him, open to the passage where he had written, "She belongs to me. No one else can understand her. No one else can protect her. She is mine, and this child proves it." Darius looked down at the page, then back up at the detective. His voice was steady. "You twist my words. I loved her. I gave her a life without fear. You call it abuse. I call it devotion." The detectives exchanged glances. They weren't hearing the words of a man in denial. They were hearing the words of a predator who saw himself as righteous. Days later, Darius was transferred to county jail to await trial. But his control began to unravel. News of the case spread across the state, sparking outrage and horror. The public saw him not as the devoted father he once portrayed, but as a monster hiding in plain sight. Prosecutors worked tirelessly, building a case with overwhelming evidence. Elena's medical examinations confirmed repeated assault. Her notebooks showed years of psychological manipulation. The journals revealed his own admissions. It was airtight. But Darius wasn't finished. One evening, during a routine transfer to a courthouse hearing, he slipped through a weak point in security. Within minutes, the streets filled with sirens and flashing lights. Officers chased him through the city, their radios crackling with updates. He fled to a high-rise building under construction. As he climbed the steel beams, spotlights illuminated his figure against the night sky. Officers swarmed below, shouting commands. "Darius, don't do this." He stood near the edge, his chest heaving, his face lit by the red-blue glow of patrol cars. For the first time his calm mask cracked. His voice carried into the night. "They'll never understand," he shouted. "They'll twist everything. I was her protector. I was the only one who truly cared." Officers edged closer, their hands outstretched. "It's over, Darius. Step down. You can still face this in court." But he shook his head, his eyes wild. "No. I won't let them write the ending. I decide." The night air was sharp, the kind of cold that cut straight to the bone. Below, flashing red and blue lights bathed the street in an eerie glow. Crowds gathered behind police tape, their voices hushed, eyes locked on the figure above them. High on the skeletal frame of an unfinished high-rise, Darius Kane stood at the edge, his silhouette outlined against the night sky. His chest heaved, his eyes wild, his hands gripping the steel beam as though it were the only thing anchoring him to the world. "Darius," an officer shouted through a megaphone. "Step back. It doesn't have to end this way." But to Darius it already had. His voice rang out, carrying across the city block. "You think you know me? You think you understand? You twist everything. I was her protector. I was her only family. She was mine." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mothers clutched their children closer. Neighbors who once waved to him in passing now stared in horror, the mask ripped away from the man they thought they knew. Detectives climbed carefully onto the beams, inching closer. "It's over, Darius," one called. "Come down. Face this in court. Give your daughter a chance at peace." At the mention of Elena, his face twisted. "Peace?" he spat. "They'll fill her head with lies. They'll make her believe I'm a monster. They'll take her from me. I won't let them." He teetered forward, the wind tugging at his clothes. For a heartbeat it seemed he might step back. His eyes scanned the faces below, the officers, the reporters, the neighbors, all frozen in place. And then his lips curled into the faintest smile, the same cold smile he wore in the interrogation room. No one decides my ending but me. And with that he leaned forward and fell. The crowd screamed. Officers lunged helplessly, their arms outstretched but too late. The sound of impact was final, brutal, echoing through the night like the closing of a coffin. Silence followed. For a moment the entire street stood frozen. Then the radios crackled, orders barked, reporters shouted questions into cameras. But one truth hung heavier than all the noise. Darius Kane had stolen the last choice for himself, just as he had stolen so much from his daughter. In the days that followed, the community reeled. Some said justice was denied. Others said justice found him in the end. But for Elena there were no easy answers. She was left to carry scars too deep to fade, and memories too dark to erase. Yet she was alive. And for the first time in years she was free. Her whispered plea had finally been heard. This is the story of Elena Marquez and the man who betrayed her. A story of control, silence, and unimaginable betrayal. But also a story of survival. Because sometimes, even the smallest whisper is enough to bring the truth crashing down. You've been watching real-life mysteries, true crime. Every crime holds a story, and every mystery begs for answers. If this story moved you, hit the like button, subscribe for more deep dives into chilling true crime cases, and share this video so Elena's voice, and the voices of countless others, are never ignored again.